and welcome to another episode of Billy Watson TV. It gives me great pleasure to have a very popular returning guest and friend on the show to talk about his Beatles research and the loss of his stepdaughter, and how he is honoring her by producing the songs she wrote. Welcome back to the show, Mike Williams, also known as Sage of Quay.
Hello, Mike Williams. It's great to have you back on the show. The 14th time you've been on Billy Watson TV, so good to have you here. And it's been a while since we've talked. I've been keeping up to date with your not so regular videos that you go on, the odd podcast with a couple of guys. I think you were talking about Jim Morrison and stuff. But yeah, how you been basically? It's been about 6-7 months.
I'm okay. It's been a rough 10 or 11 months, Billy, as you know. And I spoke to Amanda about this going back a number of months ago on her podcast, Caravan of Consciousness. And I lost my stepdaughter, Kate, back in late October of 2025. She was 29 years old. And it was very, very difficult. It's still very difficult. It's surreal. And one of the things I've been spending a lot of time on is before Kate passed away in August, we had a phone conversation, and she was a songwriter and a musician, and she had a band out in LA. The name of the band was Fangbanger. And Katie, when we spoke on the phone, she said to me, Mike, I have some demos, 17 of them, and I was wondering if you'd like to collaborate with me on them. And I said, sure. I wanted to do it. To me, it was great. I mean, I'm this old school guy. I'm going to be 68 in 6 months. And Kate was 29. And I thought to myself, it would be a breath of fresh air for me, who spends a lot of time with my music doing it solo. I don't do a lot of collaborating. I did many years ago, but not over the last 15, 20 years or so. And so I was really looking forward to working with Kate on the songs. And so in September, she sent me the 17 songs, and I listened to them. And I wrote her an email, and I said to her that I was very proud of her, that her musicianship grew in leaps and bounds, just excellent. And her songwriting was superb. Lyrics, great lyrics. She was a great lyricist. And I told her I was very proud of her. And so that was setting the stage for us to collaborate. She knew that I was working on my Yesteryear album and that I was wrapping that up. That was a 22-month endeavor. And we used to share our tracks. She would write songs and send them to me. She said, Mike, what do you think? And I would do the same thing with her. I sent her many of the tracks from my Yesteryear album before they were final to get her opinion on them and, what she thought. So, my plan was that after Yesteryear was released, that we would, or I would turn my focus to helping Kate get those demos into songs and have them come to life. Unfortunately, a month after she sent me the songs, about 5 or 6 weeks afterwards, she passed away. And it was an incredible blow. I can't even put words around it. I could talk about it more now than I had been in the past, but it's still a very, very difficult thing. And I miss her tremendously. And so what happened was back in February of this year, I tried to give the songs a go. I was starting with her first song, Better Days, which is a great song. and I was struggling with it. My brother was helping me out with it. Um, we were My brother and I were brainstorming, getting ideas how to bring the song to life. And the problem was that every time I'd listen to the song, her voice would ring out, and there she was, and I would be reminded that she's not here anymore. So to make a long story short, I had to come to grips with the fact that I wasn't ready yet to work on those songs, and I had to wait. So I waited a couple of months, and around the May timeframe, I got back into it, and I'm in July now, and I'll have the 10 songs, finished up, mixed and mastered by the end of this month. Um, it was a true labor of love. It is me keeping my promise and commitment to Kate that we would work on the songs together and we would collaborate. Um, it's going to be an honor to release the album. I'm going to obviously send it to her family, to her mother, her father, her sisters, um, because it's a gift that she left everybody after not being here anymore. And it's an unbelievable gift. And the interesting thing is, she, the songs are very different from the songs that she did with her band. So her band was a goth glam rock band, and a lot of their music was heavy rock. And they were very good at it. They released an album at the end of May. There was a release party that they had. The name of the album is called Superposition, which is an interesting title. Superposition means that you're in more than one place at the same time. So, that was very Kate, very the band, very creative in their thinking. But the songs here are different. These songs are very introspective. They're very personal. She wrote them on acoustic guitar and piano. And so, what the family's going to get to hear, her family and my family, is the, the Kate that is just Kate without other band members. Who was she as a person? And like I said, it's very introspective. And I'm so glad that I did the project, Billy. As difficult as it was um, to get through it, I'm doing it. And I had to step out of my songwriting musician role, and I had to think more in terms of being a producer, producing the songs. So I took a step back. There's 17 songs. I said, which are the 10 that I feel are the 10 best songs? Although all 17 were very good, I chose 10. And then I had to begin the process, because they are demos, of editing and rearranging so that the songs are presented in the absolute best way they could possibly be presented. And of course, this is something that Kate would have understood, because the songs were demos. And if she was still alive, we would have had gone back and forth with, what about this? What about that? Should we add this? Should we add that? How about, some strings here or a keyboard over here? So, so I was doing that process uh, via me playing on the tracks. Also, I used, or am using, an AI, Moises, to build some of the tracks for me, predominantly the drum tracks. But there are some other orchestral pieces that I'm using the AI for. And just a note to everybody: when you're doing music with an AI and you're producing and you're creating, especially in the role that you know I'm in, I have the demos. I have to build upon what I have, which is basically one or two tracks, and create a finished product. Some people think that with the AI, it's just a matter of just typing in a prompt and like magic happens. Uh, a lot of times the AI doesn't get it right.
Yeah.
And my musician background has helped a lot because when it gets to prompting the AI, I can tell it very specifically, I want this to happen at this point in the song. And I want these types of strings. I want slow, mellow strings. Um, that type of thing there. So that's the way I'm doing it, collaborating myself, AI, of course, with Kate because she wrote the songs, and it's a lot of work. It really is, but it's going to be fantastic what it's done. And I'm also planning on releasing the entire album on vinyl.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
You do that with your own records as well.
Yes, I do it through SoundCloud. I'm a SoundCloud Artist Pro, and in the Artist Pro category, um, they have um, they have an association with Elastic Stage. That's the name of the company out of the UK. And so they will take your digital tracks that you have on SoundCloud and they will press them to vinyl. So they have some kind of process where they're able to take the digital output and convert it over to analog pressing. So they have to do something there with the mastering. I'm not really sure, how they do it. It's probably all AI driven, but there's a conversion that takes place. And I have the albums. In fact, here's my yesteryear album, and
Cool.
that's the vinyl. That's the back of it. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and simple, but I have to say that the pressing is actually quite good. Is it audiophile quality? No, but is it a good listen? Yes. So I'm going to do that for her album as well, and I'm also going to contact them to see if they will also press CDs on demand.
Right,
Yeah.
cool.
So
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's quite a difficult project for you, and you've took some time. You said there was two tracks, like it was just her guitar and voice, and are you using her voice to take it on the final one? And
yes,
are you redoing the guitar?
yeah. So I had to break out her songs, the demos. I had to break out the stems, and so the AI will break out the stems. In all of the songs, it's her voice. There was no way I was going to substitute her voice. It had to be her voice. Um, all of the stems came out great. So her voice is there. It's powerful. Um, I also, where I was able to, I retained her guitar playing and her piano playing.
Right.
In some cases, when you break out the stems, especially with something like a guitar or a piano, sometimes you get artifacts or some swooshing type
Mm.
of effect. Where I was able to edit and fix that in Audacity, I did that. Where I wasn't able to, what I did was I went into the AI and I took Kate's guitar track or her piano track, and I went into the AI and I said, here's the reference track. I want you to emulate this. So the AI did it. So the AI would go take a listen to, well, quote, listen to the guitar track or the piano track, and then it would give me a emulation or a replication of her playing, but without all of the, some of the swishing or the artifacts that I was having difficulty with uh, trying to correct because of the splitting of the stems out. And so the like the guitar and the piano in that case are inspired by her.
Yeah,
So that was that was I wanted to stay very very tied into her.
yeah,
And of course there were other tracks where I played on them, and especially there was two tracks in particular where it required a lead guitar track, and I laid those tracks down myself. And there were tracks where I played the guitar, not the AI. Tracks where I played bass, and because that would have been Kate and I collaborating.
Yeah.
So that's been the process, and it's been um, very very interesting. I had to teach myself the whole AI bit of it. Uh, so it's not difficult to learn, but you do learn quickly that it's not a magic wand.
Yeah.
That there are things that you have to do that uh, to keep it honest and to keep it in a direction where you want it to go. I tried a couple of times where I let it try to do its own thing, and I listened to the track, the stem it built. I thought, no, that is absolutely not going to work.
Yeah.
Delete and then start the process over again. So, in any case, that is what I have been very, very focused on, almost to the exclusion of everything else. You mentioned I did do some shows with Dom and Chris Watterson from the Sheep Farm Studios. Some of those shows weren't me. They did the shows with Matt Sergio, the Occult Beatles, and Matt's a great guy, very, 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 very good at um, his breakdown of the Beatles and all of the occultism. Excellent, in fact. So that's been it. Back in January, I released my AI analysis of Was Paul McCartney Replaced, which, in my opinion, is a slam dunk. And again, from my opinion, from my perspective, the discussion of whether he was replaced or not is done.
But this
That,
is, you were using like 30 different images
yeah,
using AI for this. And this leads
rock,
to the question, first of all, focus on Paul.
yeah,
Was he replaced, or was there another Paul McCartney in the band? Certainly, but the AI was kind of had two versions and then a whole load of other ones, was it? Like, and the
yes,
question is, the original Paul, pre Sergeant Pepper, was there doubles then?
yes,
Basically, so was there more than one? And there's potentially yes for like collecting up the NME ward and stuff like that.
right,
And then what happened to Paul after he was replaced? Billy Shepherd, did he die, or is he this Halliday character, which was quite a strange one? This
yeah,
John Halliday being looking so quite similar to Paul McCartney and being at his house to take guests round. I mean, that was quite bizarre. So that's another question. And then basically, Billy himself, is he got replacements?
yes,
Some people think that he's got a double even to help him do stuff. So even just that's a very small thing. And then you've got the actual Beatles himself. Was there doubles of all four of them, or
yeah,
more than one double? That's again pre '67. And then I look at John Lennon. Different. There's different John Lennons as well, if you ask me.
yes,
And certainly the one, again pre '67. When I look at the later one with Double Fantasy and stuff, I just don't think that's the same guy as well, But it's not so much focus on him. But anyway, you done this AI research with the 30 photos, and what did you find? Was that the main thing you done, just a photo analysis?
yeah. My intent was I had started the analysis going back last year in 2025, and I started pulling images together, and I started dabbling with grok with the images, and then I had my challenges. Katie passed. 2 weeks before Kate passed, my dog Charlie, who was my longtime companion, he passed away. Uh, Leading up to Kate's passing, situations and events backed into my marriage. Uh, and so it was a very difficult time. And I was trying to get this thing going with the AI analysis with McCartney. And I just put it on the back burner. I said, I just can't do this right now. Um, I was burnt out with the Beatles to begin with. But I wanted to do this because I thought that it would be a good thing to do. Because most people, when they're doing this comparison with whether McCartney was replaced or not. They're eyeballing it, and I thought, well, there's a lot of things that AI is very good at, and one of those things is just taking a look at things and doing measurements. With Grok, that's what I use. It's X's AI. They called it landmarks. So landmarks would be the distance between pupil to pupil, right? The distance of the length of the bridge of the nose, uh, the width of the mouth, the length of the jaw, the width of the face, the ears, um, the philtrum here, the distance between the bottom of the nose and the top of the lip. This is all being done objectively by a machine, an artificial intelligence. And so what I did was I collected, I think it was 33 or 34 images. And I chose images I tried to pick varying images. I didn't want to pick images that were very similar, or I just said, no, let's just go down the timeline and pick out images over time. That's what I did. So I didn't want to have a preconceived uh, sense of what I thought the output would be.
But you said yourself, and do you not think that quite a lot of pictures over the years have been, manipulated?
Yes,
So, they put certain features of Billy into Paul pictures.
yes.
Who knows, who knows when that started?
I think that began very early on. In fact, I have just remind me of that. I'll bring up a situation which is very, very telling and very interesting. It has to do with Billy's condition. It's referred to as hallux extensus. It's where his large big toe on his right foot, it cocks upward. And just bring me back to that, Billy, in case I forget, because that's a great example of doctored images. So in any case, so I chose these images, and like I said, I didn't want to have any preconceived notions on my part, and I had more than 30 something images. I had maybe 50, and I just said, okay, I'm not going to sit here and do 50 of them, but these 30 are a good representation. So what I did was, to net it out, I asked Grok to take a look at the images and let's start grouping them. So group A is the core group. So the core group represented what Grok considered to be biological Paul McCartney, based upon the landmarks, the analysis of the facial features, distance between pupils, like I said, bridge of the nose, length of the face, width of the face, the mouth, everything. Ears, where the ears were visible, forehead. And so we established a core group of Paul McCartney. And then as I was asking Grok to take a look at this particular image now, it would come back and say, this image does not have similarity to group A, or the core group. So, okay, let's put that in B. So that whole process, that was the process. And then we ran into images where the person that is referred to as Paul McCartney in the image did not fit in the core group, group A or group B. So they wound up in group C, which I refer to as the outliers. So the outliers would be people who page in and out of the role of Paul McCartney for whatever reason, doubles, lookalikes, but they weren't biological Paul, and they weren't the group B person, which is Billy Shears. So once we put the groups together, we established group A, biological Paul McCartney, and then I spent a lot of time on group B because I wanted to see what Grok had to say with the images that were there. Should they all be there? So we took an initial run at what that group would look like based upon the images and where they were placed. And I personally had questions, and I was being very objective. And I kept reminding Grok, you must stay objective. Forget about the fact that we're talking about Paul McCartney. Stay objective and neutral and just measure the landmarks. That's all we need to do. Do the facial analysis. Stay there. And I kept at it and kept at it. And Grok would say, yes, not a problem, staying very objective. Because I always had a question about some of the images that during the White Album period, whether that was Billy. Because if you look at the portraits that are contained within the White Album, the 4 images, pictures of the Beatles, the one of McCartney always looked off to me. It just didn't look right. And so I asked Grok, let's take a look at this particular image here. In fact, I had 2 images that were from the White Album period. And I asked him, let's double check to make sure that those 2 images, those 2 people depicted in those images, that they belong in Group B.
And Group B is kind of the ones you would definitely, the later ones that you would say, yeah, that's what we
Billy.
say. Billy, yeah.
That's Billy.
So
So when I asked Grok, I was really pushing Grok to analyze, because myself, I wasn't sure. There were times I thought that was another person playing the character of McCartney during that period, at least for the photo ops, the pictures that were released to the public. And Grok came back and said, no, very strong similarity. So the net of it is this. Group A was Paul McCartney. Group B is Billy Shears. And Group C was the outliers. There was one image in Group C that a lot of people like to point out and say, oh, this is Paul McCartney during the Hamburg days. And it's the image where he's got his hair slicked back and he has a kind of the cute McCartney look and with the pretty boy face. And I said to Grok, is it possible that that image is a hybrid of the Group A person and the Group B person? Is it possible? Grok came back and said, it's very possible that is a hybrid. It's a mock-up combining both biological Paul McCartney and Billy to form this particular image. So basically, Grok was saying it was a doctored image. But it is an image that a lot of people want to point to and say, oh, that's Paul McCartney during the Hamburg days. Wasn't he cute? Wasn't he handsome? Well, it's not biological Paul. It's a composite. It's a hybrid of biological Paul and Billy. And then, when you look at the Group C, some of them are very obvious that they are not McCartney. I mean, are there similarities in facial features? Yes. But is it him? Absolutely not. So the moral of the story with the analysis is, and this is what Grok determined, was there were at least 2 people playing the role of Paul McCartney over the timeline. At least 2 people. And, I released it, and there were a lot of people that were very happy I released it, because especially those that are into the whole Paul is dead investigation and the research, because it was as close as we're going to get to a, quote, forensic analysis. Some people want to say, well, can't we get DNA? Who's going to give you DNA? I've explained, over the years many, many times, this was a deep state operation. It was a psychological operation, right? And so, no, there's not going to be any DNA. The closest we got to it was the Erica Huber's paternity suit.
yeah.
That in Germany, right? But that came back, and it wasn't DNA back in those days. It was a different type of a blood analysis that Billy had to give, and so even with that, it came back and said that the blood didn't match, which got Billy off the hook, because what the court decided was that he wasn't the father.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, it's kind of comical in a way, not for the Hubers, but I mean, when you take a look at it from the outside looking in, no, he's not the father.
Aye. Well,
and,
Paul
and that
McCartney is.
Paul McCartney is. So, you know, so again, this AI analysis, as far as I'm concerned, basically shuts the door on the whole thing. And anybody that wants to argue it, you're just not coming to grips with reality. I have said to people that all you need to do is look at the summary chart that I put in that analysis, in that presentation, take a look at the three groups, and you should be it should be very, very easy to see that there is more than one person playing the role. And if you can't see that, then I don't know what to tell you. And also, I hope you're never in a position where you've got to pick somebody out of a police lineup.
Well, this is the thing. I don't think you really need what you've done to see it. I mean, even the heights. Oh, we get
Yes,
Jane Asher at a certain height. Obviously, she's
right.
with the two Paul McCartneys, and there's like a 6 inches difference.
Yeah, and Billy towered over Jane. And of course, we have Billy's eye. So, and that's a real thing.
What about the Italian forensic team as well? They were
Yes,
the ones that tried to disprove it. So there was another quite hardcore analysis.
yes, that was back in 2009. So they took on two forensic experts out of Italy, and it was published in the Italian version of Wired magazine, Wired Italia. And they entered into that investigation thinking it was going to be a slam dunk, that Paul's always been Paul. But as they were taking a look at the photos that they had, and they took a lot of time to make sure they had quality photographs, that should be noted, they had more and more questions. And by the time that they got toward the end of the investigation, they had concluded that there was two different guys playing the part of Paul McCartney. That analysis basically got quietly erased from the internet, and it just flittered away. Interestingly enough, after that article came out, that's when Billy went on the Letterman show.
Yeah.
In that famous interaction where he was talking about the whole Paul is dead thing, and that there was a lookalike or a double that took his place. And Billy said, yes, that would be me.
Huh.
Where he was masterfully speaking. Of course, the audience is, laughing and thinking, it's a big joke, but Billy was masterfully speaking with Letterman. And so, Billy came on the Letterman show in order to, in an effort to essentially suppress the Italia Wired magazine article that came out and said that in all likelihood, the guy that's playing Paul McCartney today is not the original guy. So that goes back 17 years ago.
I find it quite interesting now, though. It's almost like he wants people to know that he is. And again, this masterfully speaking, there's so many instances where he's told you outright. In fact, I've got a wee clip here. I'll just share it. It's about a minute long.
Sure.
In the new Spinal Tap movie, he does a wee reference here. So we'll just play this. Again, he's just blatant with it.
In the E chord, and it brings us right back to the top.
No, you can explain it all you want.
Yeah.
It's just that when I hear it,
I interrupted.
is that what's happening in that bit?
No, what's happening is that you're pushing back against anything you don't care for or anything you don't understand, which is a lot.
Hey guys. Hello. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Paul here. Is that the Paul?
It's one of them. Well, no, it's the one actually.
Well, I was listening. I got a suggestion for you.
So is that the Paul? It's one of them, actually. I mean, again, it's absolutely blatant, but
Yeah.
you can't miss it if you're not tuned in.
Yeah. Billy wants people to know, but he's doing it in an indirect way. For instance, publishing the memoirs of Billy Shears. The first edition came out in 2009. I think the most current edition goes back to May of 2023. Um, but the way he's working this thing is for those who are intrepid, you're going to know. And so he's playing to that audience. He also realizes that the vast majority of the fan base and the population think he's Paul McCartney, and any discussion about him not being Paul McCartney is going to be pushed off as just conspiracy stuff. So, also, I want to just mention, Billy, in the AI analysis I did with Grok that was released back in January of this year, toward the end of the presentation, I introduced an image of Vivian Stanshall.
All right, yeah.
And Grok said, yes, that person belongs in Group B. So that places the Stanshall character with the Billy Shears character, Billy Shears McCartney character. So, Billy did play Stanshall as well as obviously the McCartney character. And I did start a Stanshall analysis with Grok going back to last year as well. And I really haven't had the time to complete it because I've been working on what I've been working on with Kate's songs. Maybe at some point I'll finish that up. But if I don't, it kind of comes full circle in the January 2026 presentation. So it's toward the end.
Yeah. Here's another clip I'll share basically with him doing this again. I went through a wee period of collecting these clips. I sent you a couple, I'm not sure.
Yes. Yeah.
This one, but
merit. It was just the fact that Lennon and McCartney had written it or had written it. So to try and prove that wrong, I wrote a song under another name. And I thought I got away with it. It was a song called Woman for Peter and Gordon. Remember them? And it was quite a nice song. I wrote it under the name of Bernard Webb. And I signed Bernard Webb, And I thought I got away with it, but then we were doing a show in Shea Stadium. And I looked up and there was this great big banner at the back of the thing. Long live Bernard Webb.
And you were rumbled at last.
Rumbled, yeah. And I looked up and there was this great big banner at the back of the thing. Long live Bernard Webb.
And you were rumbled at last.
Rumbled, yeah.
rumbled at last. But I'm sure, I don't think that story is real, It's just, he puts these things, makes them up just to mock you, a duper's delight kind of thing.
Yeah, well, Billy, he had different aliases that he used over time. When he was doing his McCartney album, his first solo album, he went under Billy Martin. And he had other names that he used. But I also believe that, and I've talked about this, Billy, I know you know, that he was ghostwriting for the Beatles.
Yeah.
Before he came out on the Sgt. Pepper album in June of 1967. And I point to the article that came out that he said that he wrote the music to the song In My Life. And when he came out with that, and they published it, there was the mainstream media went into damage control because the official narrative says that In My Life is a John Lennon song, beginning to end. Some stories say that Paul McCartney contributed a little bit to this. Other stories will say that it was just 100% Lennon. But none of the stories said that Paul McCartney wrote the music to In My Life. And Billy came out and said that going back a number of years ago. And so the mainstream media then, like I said, they went into damage control, and they had two universities analyze it with a computer. Of course, if you analyze something with a computer, it's got to be true, right? So, and they said that he was mistaken. He misremembered.
All right.
And there's just no way, if you write a song like In My Life, which is one of the greatest rock songs of all time. I mean, if you take a look at any music poll over the last few decades, or since that song was written, it's always near the top. And so you don't misremember writing In My Life. That would be like somebody telling me that I misremembered writing one of my songs.
Yeah.
But no, I remember writing my songs. I didn't misremember. So that was him again, in a way, masterfully speaking, and giving everybody a wink and a nod, and telling people that he was there before he was there, that he was behind the scenes. So I believe he was writing music for the Beatles as one of the songwriters, the ghostwriters, and I also believe he was, uh, in all probability, playing on recorded tracks.
I wonder if, well, obviously that would maybe have helped to transition, or the Beatles more readily accepting him. I mean, I don't think they had much choice, really, whatever was going on in the background. But the fact he was there in the background, he was part of the team already. It wasn't like they were bringing in an outsider.
Yes, in memoirs, it mentions that the Beatles, the way memoirs presents it, is the Beatles were aware of Billy because of his studio work when he came to EMI to record. So there's a passage in memoirs that talks about that. And I think that that's Billy's way and Tom's way of explaining that Billy was there at EMI Studios, and he was recording. And like I said, in all likelihood, he was writing songs as well. And so I think you're correct, Billy. That John, George, and Ringo, they knew who he was. They may not have known, like, in intricate detail who he was, but they were at least associated with him, especially if he was writing some of the songs, or he was one of the studio musicians playing on the recorded tracks. And some of the Beatles, or maybe all of the Beatles, were in the studio at the time during the recording of the tracks. I mean, they would, if he was there playing whatever he was playing, piano, he could have played, like I said, he was a wind instrument player, he still is. Uh, they would have seen him, they would have known him. At least, at the very least, they would have known him from,
What do you think of the
acquaintance.
story? What do you think of the story of him? Was it when John Lennon went somewhere to film, to do a movie about, I think it was the war, how the war was won or something like
Yeah.
that? And
Mhm.
around that time, Paul McCartney, or Billy, whatever, Paul McCartney, in theory, did he not go somewhere? And that was claimed when he was getting facial surgery done
Kenya.
in Kenya. So he
Yeah.
had out of the Beatles narrative, and he's came back differently.
Yeah.
Because Billy is originally, well, there is pictures of him in Kenya. He does have black hair. For some reason, I'm thinking he maybe had blonde hair before. Obviously, his son James is kind of blonde. Did he dye his hair or something? Or
Yeah. Billy has, he has blondish red hair. And so if we take a look at the Stanshall character, I know some
yes,
people still having a hard time with that, but I'm telling you, he played the role of Vivian Stanshall in the Bonzos. It's very important because there were at least two Vivian Stanshalls. There was Victor, who didn't play in the Bonzos, and he was the tall, lanky guy. He was 6'3", very, very skinny. And then there's Billy, and Billy played with Neil Innes in the Bonzo Dog Band. Um, yeah, so the story goes that, at least from the Paul is Dead research community, he went to Kenya, and that's where he had at least the beginnings of the surgeries, the plastic surgery and the fillers and all of this stuff. Had his hair dyed black. Um, some people have said to me that Stanshall he had a bit of a receding hairline. So how is it that Billy was able to have a full head of hair, as an example, in Let It Be, the Let It Be film, and he's pushing his hands through his hair, which I thought was intentional. I think he was doing that to to show that he could do that. In other words, he wasn't wearing a wig, because if you're wearing a wig, you do something like that, you might pull the wig off, right? I have long suspected that he had hair weaves.
right.
And with hair weaves, you could do that. You could run your hands through your hair and not worry about lifting the piece off your head. So, and also going back a number of years ago, I spoke to a family member who is an esthetician, because people would say to me, oh well, look at the hair on his arms, it's black, or the hair on his legs, it's black. And so in memoirs, it says that he used to dye the hairs on his body, and he would cover up his private areas or sensitive areas, and he would color the rest of the hair on his body. So, I didn't know about this. I thought to myself, really, that's okay. So, a family friend who is an esthetician, I asked him, I said, do people dye their body hair, like their arms and their legs? They said, oh, yeah, absolutely. So, what I thought that, initially when I read it, I thought it was something a little strange. As, do people really do that? And here I had an esthetician tell me, yeah, people actually really do that.
I mean, he was playing in the upper echelons of, the Tavistock or whatever, and it's high stakes, so they're going to put out all the efforts they can into selling that story and whatever it takes.
Well, you're absolutely right, Billy. That's the other thing that we have to take into consideration. The Beatles were a deep state operation, they were a psychological operation, and so they had the deep state behind them. So, there were technologies and there were procedures and there were surgeries going back that were available to an operation like this that the public had no idea existed. As an example, when I talk about latex, a lot of folks think that latex is, the last 20 years or so. They don't realize that latex goes all the way back to the 1930s, and in fact was used in The Wizard of Oz.
I was going to say the lion. So,
Yeah, I mean, so it's since then latex has become incredibly advanced, and we can see today a lot of the masks that people have, and you can't even tell that a person's wearing a mask.
yeah, it's crazy these days.
I mean, the eyes look natural, the way the mouth moves looks natural. So, and Billy did use latex. This is admitted in memoirs. He had fillers, and fillers is a very common practice as far as aesthetics go with the face.
Was there not a couple of videos where it looks like it was coming off or something like that?
Well, there's a couple of videos where his latex bunches up, so
Oh,
he'll
okay.
point to his face, right, and you can see, like with mine, you'll have the
Right.
skin bunches, but his was like crinkly,
And taking a slow time to go back down.
and yeah, and like when I do this, mine goes right back, and so when he did it, it would be like he would take his finger away. It would take a while for the latex to reform and straighten out. So there was a video I still have it, where it was a rehearsal for Jet, and he's singing Jet, he's playing bass, and his whole bottom line of his neck just drops
Aye.
into his chest area like this. And at the time, how old was Billy? Let's just say that was, I don't know, 1972. Maybe he was in his late 30s. So it's not an age thing. We can't say, oh, it was an age thing where everything's just kind of dropped and drooped on him. No, it was the latex that dropped on him during that particular scene in the video. But yeah, like I said, plastic surgeries. He had rhinoplasty eyes. He had blepharoplasty to alter the shape of the eyes. That's another thing that people would want to argue. Oh, you can't change the shape of the eyes. I'm like, that is not true. A blepharoplasty could change the shape of the eyes. And, latex fillers, blepharoplasty, rhinoplasty, all of these things changed his facial features so that he looked like Paul McCartney. He wasn't an exact replica of Paul McCartney. That's the other thing, And because he's been playing the part for 60 years, that's who people are acclimated with.
Oh, totally, these days, yeah.
You
But
know,
I just wonder, when he came, Sergeant Pepper, and he's came on and done that interview about LSD, I think that was really possibly his first kind of big interview.
yes.
And then I don't think he had the moustache at that point, and soon after the moustache came, and they all had moustaches to kind of make you not question just him. But yeah, what was I going to say there?
With that interview with the LSD, I
Yeah,
mean, it was
just
very.
wonder if people watching it. There must have been so many people realised it at the time. Do you know what I mean? And then over time, this new Paul McCartney image is kind of plastered over the old one. But you just wonder. It's like, I guess, with the moon landings, there's a vast swathe of people who didn't believe it at the time, but nobody gets to hear these people say the story. And I'm sure it's the same with, Paul McCartney, because there was a difference in even his mannerisms. You can see he's trying to almost act in the Liverpoolian accent, but it's not quite there.
No, that was a very telling interview because there are videos out there where they present biological Paul on one side of the screen in that interview with Billy in 1967, and he's talking about LSD, and it's very obvious that it's not the same guy. First of all, his face was narrow, and he had a wig on his head, which was very obvious. Every time I see that video, I think to myself, I don't know who plopped that wig on your head, but it's like up here, and it looks ridiculous. And it's obvious that he was wearing a wig. Now I want to go back to I mentioned to you about Billy's toe.
Yeah.
Okay, so and we could kind of, I guess, roll this into the so-called proof that because of the veins on the back of Paul's hand, and this one particular channel did a video on this. We could talk about it, and I don't want to pick on anybody because that's just not what I do. But I'll just explain logically what's going on. But to set that up, Billy has or had a condition known as hallux extensus. And I covered this in a number of my videos going back a few years ago. So what is hallux extensus? It's where the big toe on a person's foot cocks upward. And Billy had this condition. And you can see it. If you go on if you take a look at his Wildlife album, he's sitting down. There's an outdoor scene. It's in a wooded area, and he's barefoot, and you can see the big toe on his right foot is cocked up. You can also see it on the cover of the Abbey Road album. So he's walking barefoot across Abbey Road, and we can see the toe on his right foot, the big toe, is cocked up. I came across an image when I was doing a presentation on Billy's foot, and there was an image of biological Paul where somebody had gone in and photoshopped and cocked biological Paul's big toe up. Now, there are plenty of pictures on the internet of biological Paul where he did not have a hallux extensus. His big toe did not cock up. If you want to do a search on the Beatles and the beach. And there was some photo shoots and photo ops there, and you could tell, Paul had, his regular toe. And his feet were narrow, but his big toe was straight. It wasn't cocked up. So somebody within the Beatles machine went out of their way to doctor that photo of biological Paul to give him that hallux extensus. Now, why would they do that? Well, they would do that because they knew that was a characteristic trait that Billy has that Paul didn't. So you've got to float a couple of pictures out there that, they think kind of closes the gap.
Yeah.
Now, today, somebody would say, well, I don't see that on Billy's feet today. And the reason for that is because there's a surgical procedure to correct hallux extensus. And I believe Billy had the surgery. And so today, if you look at his feet when he's barefoot, he doesn't have it. And that's because, in all likelihood, my bet is, and it's a pretty good bet, is he had the surgery to correct the situation.
Was there not a story about him having 6 toes or something like that?
Yes. So 6 toes. I don't know. if that's true or not. You don't know if some of these images were doctored. That's why in my song, I wrote a song called Billy Pepper, going back, I don't know, it was maybe 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. And it's a tongue in cheek song about the Paul is Dead conspiracy. And, and one of my lyrics, I'm going to paraphrase here because I'm terrible at remembering my own lyrics. Uh, Sometimes you have six toes, but who knows if that's true? And I actually have that as a lyric in the song. I don't know. I don't know if he actually has six toes. Some people claim that he had the sixth toe removed. Um, Marilyn Monroe had six toes,
Right.
and she had the sixth toe removed. So she had the operation to remove it. So could that be the case with Billy? It could be. Could it be that the six toe images are doctored? That could be too. And to be honest with you, from my perspective, it doesn't really matter because my research my research transcended the whole was Paul replace bit. And we had to really get down to why the Beatles were there to begin with, whether Paul was replaced or not. And that was to be a major league social engineering initiative coming out of the Frankfurt School in Tavistock to social engineer the world and to push cultural Marxism. And that's where my research went. The whole Paul being replaced piece of it is important. You've got to start there in order to get into the next step of the psychological operation. But you can't hang out there forever because it's much bigger than Paul McCartney being replaced.
Just to hang out there a wee bit longer, what about the voice print and analysis that was done? What is voice print? And surely that should be there's lots of videos of Paul McCartney singing yesterday back in the day compared to now, and people will just say that's not the same guy based
Yes.
on the pitch or whatever.
Okay, so a voice print, so like fingerprints, voice prints are very unique to an individual. So you have a unique voice print. I have a unique voice print. Even somebody that does impersonations, even though they could very much sound like the person that they're impersonating, if they had a voice print done, the voice print would identify that they are not the same person as the person that they are impersonating.
So if an impersonator was talking normally and then done an impersonation of somebody, would the voice print be able to tell that was the same person?
Yes. Yes, because a voice print looks at it looks, some people think that pitch analysis alone is a voice print, and it's not. Um, Voice prints, or years ago, used to be called sonograms. Today, they're referred more to as biometric voice prints. So it's the tone of your voice, it's the timbre of your voice, it's the way you pronounce words. Um, it gets some of the technology is so advanced it even is able to assess how much you open your mouth when you say a word. Um, Biometric voice prints are used for identification purposes. So police use biometric voice prints when they do an investigation. Your financial companies, like if you call your bank or you call your insurance company, whatever, many times many people are familiar with this. They will identify you based upon your voice. So
you're
that's
giving all these details, question after question, and they've probably got it sitting right there. Well, that's him. Just torture him for 5 minutes. Make him run around and get his passwords.
Yeah, so that's a voice print. Okay, so now do voice prints factor in pitch? Yes, it'll factor it in, but it just factors it in. There are the detractors. I'll call them the detractors. People who don't believe that Paul was replaced, that Paul has always been Paul, will point to a particular channel that analyzed yesterday. And what they were looking at, this person was looking at, is Yesterday being sung by Paul McCartney, and then a later version of Yesterday being sung by Billy. And in a particular couple of notes, the 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 degree of the note being a little flat or a little sharp with regard to the target note was similar. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That does not prove that they are the same person. Because if I bring 20 people into a room, 20 vocalists, and I'm talking about 20 people who can sing, and I asked them to sing yesterday, and I asked them to sing yesterday like Paul McCartney sang yesterday. What happens when out of the 20 people, there's 5 people that have the same type of inflection with that note? In other words, they're a little flat or a little sharp based upon the target note. Does that mean that those 5 people are Paul McCartney too? Pitch analysis is not used for identification purposes, period. It's a very good tool to identify where backing tracks are being used or where um, vocal tracks are uh, are being used from a previous performance. So, as an example, if Don Henley is singing an Eagles song and he sang it 10 years ago, and he's doing a concert today and he sings that same song today, a pitch analysis will be able to take a look at the vocals for the vocal from 10 years ago and the vocal today and take a look at it and see if there are any discrepancies, if they're different. If there's no difference, then the same vocal is being used because human beings are not machines. So if I sing a song of mine today, and then next week I sing it again, and a week after that I sing it again, there are going to be variations and fluctuations in my vocals. In other words, each time I sang that song, if it was put through pitch analysis, would not be identical.
Even if you're a perfect, amazing singer that could, an opera singer that knows music inside out and how to sing, there would still be a difference.
I guess if an argument could be made if you have perfect pitch, that you could pull that off. But I suspect that even with perfect pitch, there are going to be some slight nuances or anomalies that when examined, the person who's doing the examining could sit there and say, I'm not so sure. That might not be the same vocal, or it could be the same vocal. But the thing is, Billy, most singers, especially in pop music, they are not, they don't have perfect pitch.
Yeah.
And in fact, another thing that pitch analysis is good for is to see where vocals that have been recorded by these pop artists, where they have been snapped to the grid. So when they sang the vocal initially, they were flat here, sharp here, flat here, sharp here. And then pitch correction software goes in and says, these are the notes that are supposed to be hit. Boom, 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 boom. And then it snaps everything to those points, to those notes. But again, that's not a biometric voice print. Now, going back into 1968, there was a Dr. Henry Truby. He was a professor of linguistics with the University of Miami. And he took on the task very similar to the forensic scientists out of Italy in the 2008 timeframe when they were taking a look at to see if Paul has always been Paul. He looked at the song yesterday, and he then did a sonogram, which back in 1968, that would be a voice print back then. Again, the technology has advanced significantly since 1968, but still there was technology to do this. And Dr. Truby was an expert in this area, in sonograms and linguistics. In fact, he was considered to be a professional subject matter expert on linguistic topics, and he would go to court and testify in court cases. I mean, so he was an expert at this. He took a look at yesterday, Penny Lane, and Hey Jude. And again, when he entered this into this little endeavor, he thought that it was going to be a slam dunk. It's the same guy singing. But he did it. And when he got done with his sonogram, he said that there is a high probability that the person who is singing on Yesterday is not the same person singing on Penny Lane and Hey Jude. Now, he did not rule it out that it was, in other words, he wasn't saying absolutely it's not the same person. He said that there was a high probability that it's not the same person. Again, we're talking about technology that goes back 60 years ago. I have said in an interview, one of the interviews I did that I put on my Substack, that if biological Paul McCartney were alive today, or even if we just use a recording of his voice today, his speaking voice, and Billy spoke, and they were calling into their bank, and the bank wanted to identify Billy as Paul McCartney so that Billy can, transact on Paul's accounts, he would fail the biometric voice print, and he wouldn't be allowed to get into Paul's accounts, to access Paul's accounts.
Same way that he managed to dodge the baby bullet.
Yes. So the thing is, there's a lot of information out there that absolutely shows that the guy who's playing McCartney today he's not biological Paul. He's not. And just to touch on the vein thing for a second. So the same channel that did the thing with the pitch analysis, which again, like I said, is not voice analysis. It's not biometric voice analysis. So pitch analysis cannot be used for identification purposes. So you just take it and you toss it. But this whole thing with the vein, and it's the dorsal metacarpal veins on the back of your hand. So
basically, somebody's saying that there was an early version of Paul McCartney, Paul and Billy, that had the vein, and then Billy has the vein, so it's the same guy.
Right. So we're saying that the veins they map, that they're identical on the right hand playing the instrument. Problem number one with that is going back to the example I gave with Billy's cocked big toe and how images were doctored to give Paul that same feature where his toe was cocked up. In fact, like I said, I have one of those images, so I have proof that at least that image was doctored. So the first thing you have to understand is that you're without knowing your source documents or where your images are sourced from, okay? The likelihood that you're working with doctored images is high. I'm just telling you that, having done the research for a very long time and seen so many images where they have been doctored. I also mentioned the whole Grok analysis, where the one image of Paul McCartney going back to Hamburg, where he's the young, pretty-faced guy, that it very, very high likelihood, high odds that is a composite hybrid image that was put together. It's a combo of Paul and Billy. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is that the veins in the back of your hands, if you're a guitar player or a bass player and you've been playing for a long time, we have that vein.
It's on both hands. It's on your.
It could be on your fret hand as well. But in this particular analysis that this channel did, they were talking about the strumming or the picking hand, right?
Yeah.
So in Billy's case, it would be the left hand. And so the veins popping out is natural. It's very common, especially if you are a guitarist and a bass player and you have been playing guitar and bass for a long time. And like I said, this is the dorsal metacarpal veins that are coming out of your hands. So they protrude and they become prominent because of the fact that you're applying pressure all the time. So it's working the muscles in the hands, both the strumming hand and the fret hand. In my case, my fret hand is my left hand. Now, you cannot prove something by cherry picking, a couple of images and saying that this constitutes proof, especially given the fact that so many images have been doctored, photoshopped. Uh, they have been played around with since day one, going back, I think, since the inception of the Beatles. So what we have to rely on is taking a look at a much broader base of examination. And that takes us back to the AI investigation I did. Was Paul McCartney replaced back in January of 2026? You must look at a large pool of images. You've got to do that. You just can't take two images and say, "Oh, well, that proves it." Because you can, even if, you can take a look and say, "Oh, well, the veins look similar or they're identical or whatever." Like I said, we're talking about a space where images are played with in Photoshop. The truth of the matter is there are many physical characteristics of Billy versus Paul McCartney that are clearly different. Clearly different. Again, my AI analysis, was Paul McCartney replaced, I think is a very good place to start.
Well, it's like saying they've both got a head, two arms, and two legs. It's the same person. Obviously not. I mean,
Yeah, no. And Billy has, at the very least, if some people don't want to believe he's blind in his right eye, but he is. I think. In fact, I know that Sally has nailed that. He has, at the very least.
There was a wee thing he done as well. I'm not sure it was just after you talked about it, where he was in a museum.
Yes.
You've got a good eye for that, and he said, "Yeah, it's my left one."
Right. Yeah, good. We'll talk about that. At the very least, Billy has what's referred to as exotropia, where one eye kind of drips, right? And in his case, it's his left. It appears to be his left eye that drifts, but it's not. Because he's blind in his right eye is an ocular prosthetic. And he has movement in that eye. So there's another fallacy out there, and I've received emails and comments on this. Prosthetic eyes don't move. Wrong. It depends upon how badly the eye was damaged. If the eye was badly damaged, yes, then the ocular prosthetic is static. If the eye was not damaged badly, then when they put the prosthetic in, the eye muscle moves the prosthetic. And in a lot of cases, that movement is very good with the other eye. In Billy's case, it is very good. But there are times when his prosthetic in his right eye lags. And it lags when he looks hard left. So when Billy looks hard left, his left eye will go all the way to the left. His right eye does not. That's his blind eye. His ocular prosthetic is his right eye. It will go left, but not as much as the left. And that's where you can see it. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because people send me videos. They'll say, "Mike, look at this video. I'm noticing his eyes." I'm like, there you go. Now you're seeing it. You're seeing where it's not in perfect sync. So that's number one. That's one of the most important differences. It is the most important difference that Sally discovered that differentiates Billy from Paul McCartney. People talk about the height. Yes, Billy's taller. Billy has a more narrow face. Yes, he does. Billy has bigger feet. Yes, he does. But these are all things that are not as tangible to really get your head wrapped around. People will say, "Well, it's the camera angle, or maybe he's standing on a higher part of the ground." And people always want to rationalize and kind of like, I don't want to believe it, so I'll come up with all kinds of reasons not to believe it. But with his eye, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And to your comment, Billy, he was on a morning talk show. I think it was CBS going back, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And he was being interviewed by the person on the network, and he was going through that eye of the storm exhibit, and these were allegedly photos that Paul McCartney took when he was in the United States, in New York, um, going back to 1964. And so they're talking about these images, and they stop in front of this one image, and it's an image in front of this building, and there's a cop in the street. And by the way, the cop looks gigantic, and there's all these screaming girls and young people, and so like you said, the person who's interviewing him says, you really have to have an eye to take a picture like that. And so Billy leans forward. He taps his foot, which is it's a Masonic symbolism, and I forgot. I can't believe I forgot what it is, but he clicks his heel. He looks at it. He goes, "Yes, it's my left eye." So that was Billy's nod to Sally's work, that you figured it out. You got it. Yes, I am blind in my right eye, and my good eye is my left. He did the same thing for me with another interview that he did, where he talked about Let It Be and the album, and coming in to record 12 to 14 new songs from scratch. He said, to do that within 30 days. But initially in Let It Be, they were supposed to do that within 2 weeks.
Right.
And it was going to lead to a live concert. And then that was going to lead to a TV special. So as we all know, they get into Let It Be, and it's in disarray. Right? They're not writing new songs. There's a lot of goofing around. There's a lot of going back to playing cover songs, and it was just it was an unproductive event.
It seems crazy to me. I know I don't want to interrupt you, but they had all that production and everything, and then Billy's come in. Sergeant Pepper's still highly produced. It seemed to get a bit looser on the White Album with different writers and stuff. Then you've got Abbey Road. Abbey Road's amazingly well produced.
Yeah.
How did they get to the state where they let it be, and it's just like a dog's dinner, or they hand it to Phil Spector? And where's the quality control, and why is it unravelled so badly? Is this because Billy's wanting John and George to write more, and
Right.
why give them more responsibility if they're not up to it?
Right. Well, they didn't want to. George and John didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do the Get Back sessions, which wound up being Let It Be. Billy brought them in, and I believe Billy brought them in because Billy knew that they had no documented footage of them working in the studio, writing and recording music. He knew that, right?
Yeah.
He's like, we have a big piece of the puzzle that's missing. All of the stories say that we do this, but we have no documented proof that we ever did it.
Yeah.
So let's do it for Let It Be.
Right.
So he calls the Get Back sessions, and they're a disaster. They're a total disaster. And what was supposed to be 12 to 14 new songs, I think it might have been 14 new songs, a concert, and then a TV show, wound up being 5 songs played on a rooftop to nobody, and the release of a grainy movie. And a lot of people believe that all of the songs that are on the Let It Be album were recorded within that January timeframe of 1969, and that's not true. Recording for Let It Be went on beyond January and actually into the early months of 1970 before the release of the album. George had gone back to redo his vocal on, I think, For You Blue. John redid his vocal for Don't Let Me Down. Billy deleted John's bass line for Let It Be and went in and recorded his own bass line. Phil Spector said that he called Ringo in to do some of the drumming on Long and Winding Road. That was in the beginning of 1970. I think the album was released in May of 70. So there was a lot of stuff still going on beyond January. And so what happened was, Billy's doing this interview and he's talking about Let It Be. And he said, we came in to record all of these songs within 30 days. and I'm going to paraphrase, but he said it was an impossible task. He said it was impossible to write, learn, rehearse, and record these songs within a 30-day period of time. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking to myself, some people are going to think like I'm patting myself on the back. I'm really not. I'm thinking to myself, I think he's talking to me. I think what he's saying, hey, Mike, you got it right with Rubber Soul. Okay? Rubber Soul did not happen the way the official narrative says it happened. It just didn't happen. Because 4 years after, right, October of 65 to, January of 1969, they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right? They claimed they did it in October of 1965. But here they are, 3 or 4 years later, they get into the studio and they could not do what they claimed that they did back in 1965, which was to write, 12 to 14 songs from scratch and get it done within 30 days. They couldn't do it. So, and there's all kinds of excuses as to why, they couldn't do it for Let It Be, but they were able to do it for Rubber Soul. But it's just excuses, and also with the Get Back sessions, you can just see that the rest of the Beatles really weren't into it. Billy was trying to push it, and you could see that, especially John and George, their heart wasn't in it. And I don't know. Every time I saw Ringo in Let It Be, whether it be the original movie or Peter Jackson's Get Back version of it, Ringo looks like he was on an all-night drinking binge.
He probably was.
He just looked slumped over and tired behind the kit, and so I don't know. I think by the time they got to the Get Back sessions, it was just the party was over. John and George wanted out, and the reason why Abbey Road was so good was because, and Abbey Road is an unbelievable album. Abbey Road is one of my favorite Beatle albums. Is because they called George Martin back. And in interviews, Billy had asked Martin to come back and to produce Abbey Road. And George Martin said to him, I'll do it if you actually allow me to produce.
Right.
If it's going to be like the White Album sessions, which, by the way, George Martin walked out of.
Right.
Okay? He said, adios, see you, because they were unstructured. And, George Martin was very professional, period. Session musicians, arranger, producer, he had things working like clockwork. So when they got to the to the White Album sessions, it was all over the map. And, we had a situation where Ringo walked out, right, because he wasn't loved anymore. George Martin walked out. But what's interesting for me personally is I really enjoy the White Album because the White Album is, in my opinion, really the first true Beatles album where the actual Beatles played on most of the album. And I'm going to say most of the album, not all of it. Because when you listen to songs like Julia, Dear Prudence, Happiness is a Warm Gun, and you hear the guitar picking in the background, right? That's Donovan. I am absolutely convinced that's Donovan because that's Donovan's style of picking. And I actually have a couple of interviews two interviews, in fact, where Donovan talks about this. And he says, the story goes that he taught John Lennon this style of picking while they were in India.
Yeah.
But, India was a total waste of time.
Well,
Ringo was there for 2 weeks.
It was part of a movement to promote the Eastern mysticism.
Eastern mysticism, that's right. And Ringo was there for 2 weeks. Billy was there for a month. George and John hung out for, I think it was 8 weeks or whatever. And while they were in India, they weren't just sitting there practicing and learning guitar style picking from Donovan. There was an entourage. They were retreat things, events that they were doing, and all that stuff, right? So it's just another ridiculous storyline. but I believe it's Donovan that's playing on those 3 tracks. And, and we know that Billy drummed on White Album tracks. Ringo wasn't there. There's also a researcher, I can't remember his name, but I think he did the liner notes for when they released the 50th anniversary of the White Album. And in it, he said that Ringo didn't even drum on the song that Don't Pass Me By, which is his song on the White Album.
Right.
He said that the drumming on that track, on that song, the drum track was done by McCartney or Billy.
Yeah. Well, somebody said Ringo isn't even the best drummer in the Beatles.
That was a comedian who said that. It was a comedian who said that. It is always attributed to like
John Lennon.
John Lennon, but John Lennon actually didn't say that.
Yeah.
But and then we have the whole thing with Bernard Purdy. Bernard saying in that 2004 Red Bull discussion that there were 4 drummers on the Beatles' early music, and we're talking about 62 to 66, and he said Ringo was not one of them. He said Ringo's job was to play live. And even when Ringo played live, there were times when, if it was live, he played. But if it was venues where, they were playing some kind of hall or whatever, there were backstage drummers. I had a couple of people write me and say that they had firsthand knowledge of this. I'm just going back a few years ago, so I don't remember all the details. But Ringo wasn't drumming on those early songs. That's why when I see these YouTube channels and like the genius of Ringo Starr and listen to this and listen to that, listen to this and listen to that. You're listening to Andy White. You're listening to Bernard Purdy. You're listening to Ronnie Verrill. You're listening, in all likelihood, to Ginger Baker, Clem Catini. I chuckle at it. I think to myself, if you're a music channel and a drum channel, can you not tell the difference in the drumming styles over that span of time? Can you not pick that out? I have a friend of mine who's a drummer, a longtime drummer, and I had these backing tracks. I still have them. And I sent them all to him. And he said to me, Mike, I hear at least 6 different drummers on the early Beatle music. And I think in the later stuff, we are hearing Jim Keltner. I believe Keltner.
I just don't think Ringo's that good a drummer. Even when he does his Ringo Starr band these days, there's always a second drummer. If he's that good, what do you need a drummer backing you up for?
No, Ringo is a basic 4/4 drummer. I'm not taking anything away from him for that. But
talk about Ringo's drumming, people always say the Beatles drumming, he's not flashy, but it's the fills that are the great part about Ringo's drumming. He does the basic, and then there's a little fill, and I don't know, basically, if that's allowing him, if he's playing publicly, just to be basic.
Yeah.
But, again, it's probably just these guys, high precision musicians that are doing the work, and he's just the face. Even the way he was brought into the Beatles with Pete Best getting kicked out, and even though they did again know Ringo from the Germany days, didn't they?
Yeah, he was with Rory Storm and the Hurricanes.
It was just, again, they've just accepted him. They're doing the Beatles at Hamburg, this group of lads. Oh, you need to get a drummer. All right, fuck off then, get this guy in. No bother, Ringo's winning the boys now.
Well, we have to understand, like with Pete Best, Pete Best had a role in the story. Everybody had a role in the story. Maybe what some people don't know is that Pete Best's mother, Mona Best, ran the Casbah Club. Right? And that's where the Beatles really got their start as the Quarrymen.
All right.
Okay? Also, Mona didn't marry. Mona had a child with Neil Aspinall.
All right.
Right? Neil was, within the Beatles inner circle, eventually became the head of Apple. And they had a child together. And I think, Neil at the time was probably half Mona's age. And they named the child Rogue, Kind of interesting, huh?
Aye.
So Pete also said in an interview that during the early days, he was the one that was responsible for booking their gigs. Okay, so by the time August September of 1962 came around, that was the Mercy Beat article was published and said that Ringo was replacing Pete Best, and I I came to the conclusion that this was probably the plan all along, and Pete, his role in the story started here and ran up to this point. At this point, he was going to step out of the script and Ringo Starr enters. I mean, think of it as like a long running TV show that has seasons and episodes. So, Pete was in episode one and, episodes 1 through 8 for season one. And then after that, season two, oh, well, we got a new drummer, Ringo Starr. So now, he's in the show for the remainder of the time. So I don't, that's what I think. All of this stuff is just is so scripted and planned.
I wondered, have you watched recently Sean Ryder of the Happy Mondays? His daughter is also Donovan's granddaughter, because Sean married Donovan's daughter, obviously. She's done a couple of podcasts on Iconic with Gareth Icke,
Yeah.
where she's talking about the shenanigans in the music scene. And basically she was groomed, if you want, to be a famous musician, and she turned her back on it and has had a life of hell since. But she was, in the family way or whatever, the next in line to be a big star. So she's talking about Donovan and saying that it's her granddad, she loves him and stuff, but he's been MK Ultra'd essentially, and he is not fully aware of the parts. He's been essentially programmed to be Donovan, and she can't really question him too much on it because he's an old man and he's set in his ways. But yeah, that's certainly what she thinks, and she talks about certain things that happened in the family history. It's worth a watch if anyone. Sian, I think her name is, something like that.
Yeah, well, he came out with, I think it was an album where it was titled "I Am a Shaman."
Right, that was quite recent, I think.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Oh.
And I was told this story going back a number of years ago. A person, I don't even know this person. They just contacted me, and they said that they went to a Donovan show, or this was a person. They relayed the story to a friend of mine, and a friend of mine gave it to me, told me the story. So he goes to a Donovan show concert, and he has, I guess, VIP tickets. And so before the show starts, Donovan comes out and greets the people who paid for the high price tickets, right? And so this person asked Donovan, how did the Beatles write all of those great songs in such a short period of time? And so Donovan, I'm going to paraphrase here, all right, but this is essentially what he said. He said, there was a genius songwriter behind the scenes that was creating this music. And so when the guy asked him who this person was, Donovan said to him, I've said enough. I really can't say anymore. Who was that genius songwriter? Well, we could hypothesize, speculate that it was Theodore Adorno. And I have always said that Adorno was the stakeholder from the Frankfurt School in Tavistock, overseeing the overall musical content of the Beatles, with George Martin reporting kind of like probably a dotted line reporting structure to Theodore Adorno as the managing director of the operation. So Martin was really the managing director. He managed the Beatles operation. Between Adorno and George Martin, there's no question in my mind that they were writing songs as well. All of them? I don't think Theodore Adorno wrote all of the Beatles' music, as some people claim. In fact, the person who made that claim was Dr. John Coleman in his book on the Committee of 300 that came out in the early 1990s. And I didn't agree with Coleman on that. Coleman made a lot of really good points. He really did. But I did. But as I pointed out in my April 2020 big presentation, did the Beatles write all their own music? Theodore Adorno was a very busy guy. And so I just couldn't see him sitting down and writing all of these songs. I mean, the Beatles wrote between 62 and 66, something like 77 original album tracks. And that's not including the singles that were not on the album tracks. That's a lot of content to write over a 4-year period of time.
Especially when they were touring constantly.
Touring. Well, I'm talking about Adorno too. Adorno too, right?
Theoretically, the Beatles to release that.
Well, the Beatles, forget it. That was not happening. They were touring. They were doing movies. I mean, A Hard Day's Night and Help. The movies overlap with the time that they were supposedly in the studio recording the music, writing and recording the music. I mean, all of this stuff. It's just a ridiculous storyline. So I think what happened was there were probably a dozen songwriters that were dedicated to the Beatles project. And so along with Adorno, along with George Martin, you had these maybe 5 to 6 other crack songwriters, ghostwriters. And I believe, and this actually Mike Stock had this theory, and I think Mike is absolutely correct. Mike said to me, Mike, if I had to guess, I think the way they did this was they had a small group dedicated to McCartney-style songs and another group, small group, 2 or 3, dedicated to John Lennon-style songs. And that's how it worked. So you had Adorno, you had Martin, and then you had a group of 3 here and a group of 3 here, McCartney-style and Lennon-style songs. And that's how they did it. Now, as time went on, especially when we get to into maybe Sgt. Pepper a little bit, but the White Album for sure, we have the Beatles writing more of their own stuff and contributing more to the original songwriting and playing on more of the recorded tracks. But still, ghostwriters were still being used between 1967 and 1970 when they broke up, as well as session musicians. The song Piggies on the White Album, which is credited to George Harrison, George Harrison didn't write that song. That's Theodore Adorno. The whole song, lyrics, music, is pure Adorno.
How do you know his style? Where did he pick that up from?
Adorno?
Yeah.
He was into a lot of atonal music. That was number one. But he was also into Baroque, orchestral types of music. He was formally trained as a musician and arranger.
And if he released stuff, how do you know his style? Is there stuff in the public domain? You go, that's Theo.
Oh, you could just look him up. There's recordings of Adorno's music on YouTube.
Right.
In my big presentation in April of 2026, I have a little blurb in there of him doing atonal music. For people who are not familiar with atonal music, it's like if you ever listen to horror movies and kind of the music and the piano is like all over the place. It's atonal. In other words, it doesn't have a bass. So tonal music has a bass. So if you write a song in the key of G, it's tonal because the key is in the key of G. Atonal music doesn't really have a key. It just kind of bounces around. Now, if you want to extend that, atonal music is tied into avant-garde art. And Adorno liked atonal music because, he liked it because he said it's from the chaos you bring order. So there you go, right? So order from chaos again. And so in avant-garde is the same thing. It's kind of like it doesn't have order. So an atonal type of song represented in sound clips on the White Album is Revolution Number 9. Right. That's avant-garde, atonal music. Yeah. But Beatles music in general, 99.9% of the Beatles music, if we take away Revolution Number 9, was tonal. 100% of their music was tonal. I can't even listen to Revolution Number 9. It's just horrible listening experience. So Coleman said that the Beatles music was atonal. It's not atonal. The Beatles music was tonal. Adorno was into atonal music. Now, what Adorno did, questions I get asked about Adorno, and why was he, if you believe he's involved in Beatles music, why was he doing pop music, tonal pop music? Because Adorno was a cultural Marxist. And he knew that the way to alter the landscape of society and culture, to make the transition to Marxism, is that you had to utilize the pop tools to change the thinking and the mindset of the population. That's why he did that. I mean, he wasn't going to sit down and say, I'm going to write atonal music and that's going to get everybody to flip and take on different values and different beliefs. I mean, it's a non-starter. Who's going to listen to atonal music? It's grating. So he knew that by going down the mainstream route and shaping that in the direction in which the cultural Marxists, the Frankfurt School, and Tavistock, the Committee of 300, where they all wanted to go, that's how they did it. That's how
If
they
you look
did it.
at classical music, people say that was like the pinnacle of music, and like the Bach and all this kind of stuff. If you listen to that, apparently opens up your brain somehow. It stimulates things, and it's music that's designed to
Expand
enlighten.
it.
Yeah.
To expand, yeah.
Whereas this whole Theodono or rock and roll, essentially, first of all, it's in the 440 hertz,
Right.
and then you've got your three simple chords, your Elvis, your Johnny Cash, and so many songs have come from this kind of pattern,
Right.
essentially. So it's the kind of locking down what it is, whereas it's simplifying the whole what music's capable of,
Right.
and creating a mass market for that, and then obviously all the lyrics. I mean, a lot of it comes from the blues and the jazz, where they would
Yes.
use tutti frutti or whatever, it's like talk about sexual things in a way
Yeah.
people didn't realise it. So we're getting that subliminally attacking us in the 50s and conditioning us to what rock and roll is. And
Yeah. It
using that as
started.
a force.
It's a lot of it started with the beat movement,
Yeah.
and that's why the Beatles, right? BEAT is a nod to the beat movement.
Right.
There was a beat poet named Royston Ellis who knew the Beatles, and legend has it that, well, I should say one version of the story of how the Beatles got their name, Beatles, was that Royston Ellis had suggested to John Lennon that the Beatles use beat, B-E-A-T, as a tribute or a nod to the beat movement. Now, the beat movement was a Marxist movement. They were hedonistic. It goes back to the old tagline, "If it feels good, do it." This all goes back to the cult of Pan, the cult of Dionysus. It's Crowleyism.
Well, a lot of these
So,
beat poets were given acid or dope
mhm,
or whatever. Not so much acid, but in the 50s, they set the groundwork
yes,
for this Eastern mysticism, kind of Jack Kerouac on the road and experimenting and dropping out of society
yes.
type vibe.
In fact, William Burroughs was on the cover of the White Album. He was a famous beat poet.
Yeah.
John Lennon was an admirer of Jack Kerouac, a beat poet. And Billy did a show where he played guitar to um, Allen Ginsberg's beat poetry.
So these were like a forerunner to the hippies or whatever, you know what I mean? They were like laying the groundwork for the 60s.
Yes, yes. See, this is the thing. It's all connected. It's all connected. A lot of times people want to see it as it's disconnected. They just happen to be certain movements that came about at a certain time. No, it's not, because there's a very strong thread that runs through all of them. So what they did was they changed the psychological operation, they changed the tactics and the techniques as they were progressing down the road. You couldn't keep it the same, because once you covered that ground, you covered it. Now you have to move on to something else in order to move the Marxist agenda forward. And it was Max Horkheimer that said that, We're going to do this Marxism very incrementally, and they're not even going to realize that they're being indoctrinated and conditioned to be Marxists. And at some point, it's just going to be there, and it's going to be this very methodical march forward. And today you can see it today everywhere. And today's music, Billy, sucks. Okay, absolutely sucks. And that's by design. That's to take music and dumb it down even further and further and further.
I mean, I have to listen to it when I go to work, the radio in the morning. I've been saying propaganda with the news, the fucking adverts, and that music is like torture. That should be
Yes.
against. I don't want to be subjected to that every day. I mean, I've volunteered to going to have to my own music and rock music, whatever, and I've got lots of it here. And no doubt, when you read all this stuff and watch it and listen to your stuff, it can be quite depressing,
Yeah.
But there is actually quite a lot of good bands still out there. It's just this mainstream popular shit
Right.
that does go on, and it's just absolute hell to listen to
Right.
because they're putting shit in that. You get this weird sounds in it these days, and it's just like straight from Satan's fucking arsehole, if you ask me. The subliminal
Yes.
unease that it gives you. Just there's something around underneath it that I think is quite demonic. Whether it's always been there, but it's certainly more prevalent in your face now.
That's what I'm saying. They develop their tactics as they go along, and today's music, because they know music is a huge lever in being able to steer people's behavior, their thinking, their beliefs, and so the dumber they can make it, the dumber the population's going to be.
Yeah.
For the people that follow that stuff, I agree with you. I absolutely cannot. And don't get me wrong, folks. There are great bands out there. If you want to hear them, go on SoundCloud or go on Reverb Nation, where the independent artists are. But like Billy's saying, the mainstream stuff, no, absolutely not.
Yeah. There's a lot of symbolism as well that the Beatles have been involved in, or whether again we talk about the Beatles, it's the operation,
Yeah.
and like things like the Help album,
Yes.
and you're supposed to almost think that they're spelling out help, but it doesn't look anything like help.
Right.
Do you think they will just say, "Oh, just do some random poses, guys, and we'll that'll do us"? Or think the Beatles themselves know the poses they're doing? Do you think they're told to do those specific poses? And what are those poses, and what other symbolism have the Beatles done? Just before we get to that, we were just talking about the cultural Marxism. I was just thinking, like, "All You Need Is Love" by the Beatles was like,
Yeah.
tolerate everybody, we're all the same, etc. Then you got Imagine by John Lennon, which people are talking recently that Yoko Ono wrote the words for that, or she's trying to get some.
On Imagine.
Aye.
Yeah, it's been it's been speculated that she was the author. In memoirs, it doesn't say that she authored it. In memoirs, it says that the song was generously credited to John Lennon. Lennon did not write Imagine. Imagine No Possessions is no different than you'll own nothing and be happy.
Exactly.
It's the same thing.
In the groundwork.
Now on the Help album, the Beatles didn't know what they were doing. They were just told to do certain poses, and we're told the official narrative, the silly story, says that they were spelling out the word "help" in semaphore. When people hold the flags, like go to the airport, and it doesn't spell that out well, because all you need to do is take out a chart of semaphore letters, and you can see that it does not spell help. So it's very simple to decode. What it is, all of those poses on the Help album are Aleister Crowley ritual symbols. And they depict Isis, Osiris, Horus, and Set. Okay? So the Help album, when I decoded it, was a depiction of the Egyptian mythology around Isis, Osiris, and the battle between Horus and Set. Of course, Set is the god of darkness and chaos, and Horus is the god of light. So it's the conflict between the dark and the light. Um, there's no question what those symbols are, because again, you can go to, believe it or not, uh, Crowley's religion was Thelema, and there is a site called Thelemopedia,
Right.
and you can look up the ritual symbols, and you can see every one of those symbols that are on the Help album that the Beatles are posing on that site. Uh, so yeah, it was all deeply embedded. All of the Beatles' first 7 albums, for the exception of A Hard Day's Night, had 14 songs, 7 songs aside, 77. It goes back to Crowley's book 77, where Crowley explains that you need to follow and pursue your own true will. In fact, the song All You Need Is Love is all about that. There's nothing you can do that can't be done. There's nothing you can say that can't be said.
Right.
This is all in line with pursuing your will. All you need is love. Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love under will. All you need is love. So, there you go.
I've seen some. I don't know if you're aware of. I think it's Steve Faulkner, his Spacebusters. He's done this documentary recently, and he's got a pentagram, and he's saying the reason for the pentagram is like the mind influences the body, influences the spirit to mind to body to the will to the action, and that's what the pentagram points are. But if you turn it upside down and you go a different path, basically you get to the Aleister Crowley, where you don't have the spirit kind of influencing the mind.
Right.
It's just the mind. So that's what do what thou wilt be. It means it's almost like your ego is demanding something happens, and you can, without first coming from God
Right.
or spirit. What do you think of Aleister Crowley? I mean, it's quite a brazen move for them to put him on the cover of an album. But again, once you know the full picture, maybe
Well-
not so much. But he's got a bad reputation, and I've seen a video recently of these magicians who claim to be. The guy was in jail and he figured out magic to kind of survive in jail, and he's like very much promoting the use of white magic, you could say. And these guys kind of revere Aleister Crowley in some ways, some of his teachings. Do you think there's some good in his stuff that people could use, or do you think he's a purely dark musician? Obviously, he was getting up to stuff for kids and not like that, so he's not a good guy, whatever. But
I believe, my personal opinion is Crowley was a brilliant man. He was eccentric. He was an oddball, but the occult, he knew the occult. Unfortunately, Crowley's occultism was very focused on having to pass through the abyss, through the darkness, in order to transcend, to become enlightened, and to become a god. Crowley said that every man and woman is a star, which basically is saying that every man and woman, every human, can be their own god. And and depending upon how you interpret that, I I don't have a visceral problem with that myself, because if I interpret that as saying that I need to invest in myself to be the very best that I can be, okay, to me that's not a problem. People who are religious, Christianity as an example, I'm not picking on anybody, take that as heresy, because they'll say, you'll never be a god. Jesus is God. Yahweh is God. You are subservient, right? So they'll have an issue with that. But the problem with Crowley is that he was into a lot of questionable rituals that were very dark. It's always out there that he sacrificed, at the very least, he sacrificed animals. He was heavily into sex magic, especially gay sex magic. And in fact, when he took over the OTO, he made it mandatory for OTO members to engage in homosexual and gay sex magic in order to elevate to the higher degrees within the OTO. And there were people within the OTO that said, I'm not doing that. Okay, so it wasn't like everybody's like, yeah, great, sounds like a great idea. So he created a lot of conflict that way, and so there was a lot of darkness about Crowley. I mean, he was a brilliant chess player, he was a mountain climber, but he was also a heroin addict. And he thought that he could engage in heroin and not have to worry about it because he could engage his will in order to quit and kick the heroin addict whenever he wanted to.
Right.
But unfortunately for Alistair, he died in 1947, a heroin addict. So, like I said, there's parts of the guy that I look at and I say he was clearly very smart. He was very intelligent. But there was another side of him that was extremely dysfunctional and very wayward. And so that's my take. And his religion of Thelema permeates the pyramid of power. I mean, to many in the pyramid, that is their belief system. Some people will say that Luciferianism doesn't have a holy book, and I'm like, wrong. In my opinion, Thelema is that religion. That is their guiding principles. They're going back to Crowley's Book of the Law and all of his other writings that he had on his magic. So that's my opinion of him, and because of the pyramid's investment and belief and embracing the philosophy and the ideology of Thelema, it permeates pop culture. That's why he's on the cover of Sgt. Pepper. Billy Shears is an acolyte of Aleister Crowley. In the book, he tells us that Crowley mentored him for 10 years. And the 10 years is from the time that Billy was born in 1937 to the time that Crowley died in 1947. So, that's my view of him. I don't put a lot of positives on Crowley, his teachings, and where it has taken society, because it is an underpinning of how this world operates. When we talk about the world and Satanism in memoirs, it refers to Crowley as the father of modern Satanism. It just spells it out. So, like I said, I could appreciate the fact that the guy had a brain in his head and he was intelligent, but where he took his intelligence, where he took his aptitude, not good.
Yeah. I was talking about him doing a ritual and leaving it open up at Inverness, his house up there. And then he was in contact with this alien character, Lamb or something like that. It's quite mad. Well, I know time's getting on and we're about to wrap up, but I was going to mention earlier Billy's eye.
Yeah.
Do you have any sympathy with Billy? Because could that eye have been taken out in some kind of ritual at an early age? And obviously the work of Aleister Crowley and the whole playing the guitar with the wrong hand and changing his right hand to his left hand. Did he learn reverse writing or some?
Yeah, in an interview he said he had to learn to write backwards. Right. Billy did. Yep, in an interview going back a couple years ago.
So he's been groomed for this role as well.
Yes.
From an early age. Probably you mentioned his lineage as well, so it has something to do with that.
Yeah, the Douglas Hamiltons on his father's side, the Percys, two very prominent bloodlines, Scottish bloodlines. Do I have sympathy for Billy? I look at Billy neutrally, from a neutral perspective. I view him as one of the players in this psychological operation called the Beatles. I do understand that he was groomed for this. He went through conditioning, ritual abuse as a child. This is mentioned in memoirs as well. He says, mentored and being taught by Crowley. or Crowley teachers, if it wasn't Alistair directly. In his first 10 years of life, he was definitely through his bloodline. He was groomed and bred to take on a very significant role when the time came. Now, back in the day, did they know it was going to the Beatles? I don't know. Probably not. But he was definitely destined to do something that was going to be impactful because of all of his training. In the book, it explains that when Paul McCartney was sacrificed, as the book says he was sacrificed, that the hierarchy, the deep state, those that were making decisions on this, were torn between using perpetual lookalikes and doubles to fill the role, or to have a permanent replacement.
Why not just? I mean, obviously he was taken out, but I was thinking if he died, why not just wrap up the whole thing? But
Yeah,
just like crazy. Why was the need to replace Paul? Do you think it was almost this sacrificial element, and then put it in your face to see people would notice and the mockery of it? Do you think it's? I mean, it seems pre-planned. I mean, John and Paul did a Faustian bargain, and kind of Paul was saying he knew he was going to die and this kind of stuff. Yeah, it just seems strange. I've got a good formula. I guess Billy had to come in and do his part of it and somehow.
well,
Why was that replacement necessary?
if you look at it from an occult perspective, the sacrifice would be an occult ritual that guarantees in the mind of the occultist the success of the band, right? Billy coming in with his occult background then becomes a de facto manager of the band, and he's able to steer the band internally toward the goals of the deep state. And as I mentioned, these goals were centered in cultural Marxism. It's very complicated, Billy. A lot of people, they don't understand it, they don't get it. They have a very simplistic view of the world. They don't want to think that there's conspiracies. They don't want to think that there's a very, very long-term strategic plan that's been in play for a very, very, very long time. They don't want to believe these things, but that's okay. They don't have to believe it, right? Everybody can believe what it is they want to believe. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I did my research. I have my findings. I reached certain conclusions on my behalf. And then, I shared those conclusions. Now, whether somebody agrees with them or not, doesn't matter to me.
Do you think there's anything that you could have found or potentially have found that could have made your case airtight, or do you think the whole rubber soul thing was basically your biggest expose to kind of prove this? Is there any evidence out there you think, if only that existed? I know it's a kind of a hard one to deal with. Just kind of.
I'm not trying to understand your question. Are you saying, is it just rubber soul, or?
No, is there like, do you think there's any kind of evidence or something you would like to have been able to prove? If there was one thing that you've not been able to prove that you would like to have, I don't know, like.
Well, I guess if I was an eyewitness to Paul dying.
Well, that's the thing. What about the standing stone up in that place as well? That's an interesting one, isn't it?
What's that?
Standing stone up in Campbelltown.
Yeah, the standing stone. That was
good to get under there and see what's under that.
Yeah, that was Steve's work, and I don't know. Look, the thing we have to understand with the whole Beatles conspiracy is that you're not going to have direct evidence. Everything is going to be circumstantial evidence, but we also have to understand that with very strong circumstantial evidence, it's used in courts every single day, at least here in the United States, to convict people of crimes, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of other research that goes along with this. So you just can't look at it at the Beatles by themselves. You have to understand the backdrop. You have to understand the landscape. You've got to know about the deep state. You've got to know about the Committee of 300. You have to know about, the Illuminati, or whatever you want to refer to them, to the control system. You have to know about this stuff, because that's the foundation in which this stuff is built upon. And you've got to, you have to understand the Bilderbergs, and you have to understand Davos and the Club of Rome,
You see, this is what
all of that.
I was saying something about you. Like you got into the Beatles, and then that's led you to undergo into the Tavistock and everything. But I was sure you were doing shows on conspiracy things before.
Yes,
You
yes,
know
yes.
that. So it wasn't like that opened that up to you. It's maybe allowed you to go down deeper routes.
No, I mean, I was familiar with social. I was very familiar with social engineering and Tavistock and MK Ultra. I mean, in fact, I interviewed somebody, Alyssa, going back years ago. She was an MK Ultra survivor, so I was into all of this stuff. The thing was, Billy, at that time, before I started reading the memoirs in 2016, I didn't give any thought to the Beatles being part of all of that.
Yeah.
It was, I just didn't connect the dots.
Was weird scenes from the canyon out at that point?
I think it was, but I hadn't read the book yet. So I think I read the book later, a little later, but it came together like starting in 2016. And that's when, I mean, I'd like to claim that I knew all of this stuff going back way back when, but it just doesn't work that way. Things evolve over time. So, I started looking into the music industry. I mean, I already knew that Hollywood was, was part of the whole social engineering fabric. But bringing the Beatles in, I mean, I told Sophia Smallstorm in the first interview I did on this, going back to September of 2016, that leading up to that, I thought Paul McCartney was always Paul McCartney. I just chalked the whole, Paul is Dead thing up as a marketing ploy by the Beatles. It was a gimmick to interact with their fans, but, I had to swallow a big load of glass when I had to finally admit to myself that I was wrong.
It was quite funny that you've took that guy into your school to do the presentation when Paul is dead all those years ago. And then,
1976, that was, 1976. Yep. And his name was Doug. It was my friend Adam's older brother, and he did a whole thing on all of the clues on the albums and the backmasking and all that stuff.
yeah, I've got a lot of videos here lined up to play, but we've not got time. We'll maybe come back and do them another time. But
Whenever. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to wrap up with today?
Oh, I see you got a troll in the comments there.
Yeah. Peter and Reason.
Yeah.
Basically, these people that can basically saying Mike's not a good researcher and he doesn't know his left hand from his right hand. But again, what do these people do? This is what gets me. The ones
They don't do anything.
Aye.
They write stupid stuff like that.
Basically, show me what you've done, mate, and then we can have a talk.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things, Billy, where you just have to ignore that stuff, and I do. I just ignore it. I know what my research was about. I know the people that I worked with on the research, like Sally and others, and I know that what I have presented over the years with regard to the Beatles is true.
Yeah.
Now,
So you get 100 comments and you get one bad comment and you focus on that one.
oh, don't even worry about that stuff. Seriously, it's you get nitwits like that all the time, and it's not worth your time and energy to even pay attention to it, because the thing is, you have to transcend all that stuff, and you've got to get into the realm of critically thinking for yourself and connecting dots.
Yeah, just replying to this Robert guy here. Thanks very much, Robert. He enjoys the show. Actually, I met somebody at an Acid Mother's Temple gig in Glasgow, this Japanese rock band. They came up to me and said, "You're Billy Watson," and I watched your interviews with Mike Williams. I've done a show actually in a comedy show in Glasgow Festival. 3 guys from England came up to see me based on our interviews as well. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, they were big fans of yours. So, again, I meet people in person now coming up to me and admiring your work. And,
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I mean, there's a lot of people. I've gotten a tremendous amount of positive feedback over the years, and I really, really do appreciate it. Like I said, um, I'm just doing my thing. That's it. I just got interested in it. I was a huge Beatle freak, and once I got into it, the tide turned, and I discovered a lot of things that I never thought existed. And I want to say hello to Robert as well. Robert is a fellow musician, and he's out of Italy, and he's a really, really good guy. Robert and I have known each other for a long time. Hi, Robert.
Thanks for listening, Robert. So, yep, we'll be back some other time in the future. How can people find your work in this Yesteryear album, and also the one coming out soon? Would you like to tell them about that?
Yeah, just go to my hub website, sageofquay.com, SAGEOFQUAY. All of my links are there. You'll find the links also to my music website. That's a separate website. I'm also on SoundCloud, Reverb Nation, and a couple of others. Oh, I'm on Bandcamp. So that's where you can find me.
Yeah, well, I was having a listen to Mike's Yesteryear album, and I've listened to his other ones in the past as well. Very well produced, very good stuff. And again, there's lots of great music out there that doesn't get promoted. So go and give Mike a listen and give him some feedback. I'm sure he'll be delighted to hear it. In the meantime, take it easy. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.